Welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Collective. Today is Tuesday, and we are launching another interview, and I'm very excited about this one. But before I introduce the guest, I would like for you, as is tradition, to go get your favorite beverage. For me today, it is the MMN Grounds for Connection Multifamily Approved Blend. Yes, that's right, our own coffee here at the Multifamily Media Network. But this episode is for Multifamily Collective, and I had the opportunity to catch up with Michael Kramer, a business expert and keynote speaker, a couple of weeks ago. And just a quick note on Michael. When Michael was 21, his father, a deeply respected and by all accounts successful businessman, died broke. This left his mother without enough to even dig his father's grave. And fueled by the tragic event, Michael promised himself that no one in his family would ever feel the pain of being broke again. At 28, Michael started a franchise business where he rose to become the number one operator out of 150 owners, applying the systems and processes that were instrumental to his success as a franchise owner. Michael went on to start, buy, and sell 7 businesses, eventually landing on the real estate investing, which is his sole focus today. Today, with his family, he owns and operates 10 real estate related businesses with a portfolio worth $40 million. This includes a private equity real estate fund, which helps create generational wealth for investors. Michael is also an Amazon best-selling author of a recently released book, Empathetic Leadership, which he co-authored with the world-renowned hostage negotiator, Chris Voss. I got to tell you, this conversation was awesome. Michael is awesome. And what he has put together on the premise or on the basis of his life story is just tremendous. And we really dig into that. And I'm very excited to bring that to you. So again, grab your favorite beverage, grab your favorite writing utensil, get yourself a piece of paper or a Remarkable or something to write your notes down on, because there are a lot of notes to take during this episode. So hope you enjoy. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we've had some fits and starts getting to record day, but I absolutely appreciate your grace and all of that. And here we are. I'm very excited about this discussion that we're going to have.
No problem at all, and I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
Well, Michael, I had the opportunity to do some research, obviously getting prepared for this interview. And one of the things that really struck me in a pretty profound way is the video that you share on your website. I actually think it's Below the Fold, but it talks about the story of Freed. And I'm just wondering if you'd let our audience know a little bit about the origin story of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a story that was not a fun story to experience, but nonetheless has led me to where I'm at. So I'm happy to share. It does go back to when I was a young man. My mom came to me, her youngest son, and told me that she didn't have $600 to dig my dad's grave. And what was crazy, Mike, is that the day before, he had died in our living room. And so she's grieving and she's feeling the weight of the loss of her husband of 40 plus years. I'm grieving and seeing the loss of my hero, the guy that I wanted to be. And then to hear these words from my mom and to see the look on her face, that just as I say this to you, I can see the look on her face of fear, concern. And by the way, I'm the youngest boy. I've got 4 brothers and 5 sisters. And so for her to come to me felt heavy. And I remember thinking to myself, how in the heck does a guy who's run a business for 40 years and have a great reputation end up dying broke? And it didn't make sense to me. But I promised myself that day that I didn't know how, but I would never let something like this happen to anyone in my family again. And it kind of set me off on a journey. And so I ended up a few years later buying my first business. It was a franchise business, and learned through systems and processes the power of a franchise and quickly became very successful in that business. In the first year, I was the fastest growing franchise. In years 2 and 3, I was the top sales franchise out of 150 locations nationally. And I remember they asked me at the end of the 3rd year to speak at the convention. And I'm 28 years old at this time, and I'm standing in a room of, call it 300 people in the front of the room. And I'm giving this talk about how to be successful in franchising. And it struck me that I had been on the planet less time than many of these folks in the room had been in business. And yet I'm the one that is upfront telling them how to do it. And what was interesting is after that sort of keynote, I was being followed around by different groups of people for the rest of the weekend, just wanting to spend time and talk about what it is that we were doing. And I felt like it was such an unremarkable conversation because all I could say over and over again is, I just followed the process. I just took the operations manual and did what it said, and it led to great success, and you can do the same. And so it was a little bit weird to me, to be honest, to have those conversations. And on one hand, while I felt like, I'm a movie star and everyone wants my advice and attention, on the other hand, behind the scenes, I had a lot of problems at home, and ultimately that led to divorce with my kid's mom and myself, which was very, very disheartening because all of the work I had done was for my family, and all of the efforts that I put in was to right the wrong of my dad, and yet here I am failing as a father. And that really, really, that was a low point, even lower than realizing that my dad had failed, ironically. And so that sort of set me on a new journey where I had to say, okay, how do I balance this? I want to create wealth, but it can't be so myopic and singular focused that it costs me my family. And how do I honor them going forward? Right. So that's how Freed by Real Estate was created, is sort of born out of these two pains. One, how do I create wealth? And two, how do I honor my family? And so now we have this dual mandate where everything we do is with family and for family. I've got 12 family members that work full time in the business, doing a variety of different things, which may sound crazy to some people. Like, how do you work with family? And trust me, I know I wonder how, but it's also the greatest blessing, honestly, Mike, to be able to pour into my children. And the one job I can't be replaced in is as a father. And so to pour into my family and to help them to see, how to create wealth, but also doing it with a real strong relationship connection has been, one of the things I'm most proud of with the real estate business that we're in today. So now we focus on doing the exact same with other families who are aspiring to do the same, right? Like, I want to create wealth in real estate. I don't know how, and I want to maintain harmony in the family. And oftentimes, sadly, that the second part of that is more challenging than the real estate part. And so many families are broken apart or damaged, if not broken apart, by somebody focusing in the family so much on something that the relationship among their kids and their spouse breaks down or is damaged. So that's been a key part of our focus, is to do both. It's not been easy, but that's what we do.
Definitely. I love the acknowledgement of it not being easy. I do have a question as it relates to what I know is breaking the cycle, in what traditionally has been sort of a generational cycle. Like, so learned behaviors expressed into the future generations. You had a moment of realization that you could be the person who broke the cycle. And I'm just wondering what's going through your head. You're 28, 29, whatever your age is. You're in my head, you're still forming sort of your business philosophies, your personal philosophies, and so on and so forth. But what was in your head that caused you to decide, I'm going to be the person that breaks this cycle? Because that's big. And I love that. I just love to know.
It goes back to, the day my mom came to me, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because that was such a tragic day, not just because of dad dying. I mean, he had been sick for 3 years and we knew it was coming, but that moment is still heavy. And then the reconciling of what I thought he was as a young man growing up, meaning I thought he was a successful business owner. I thought he had a good operation. He owned a collision repair shop and had owned it for 30 plus years. And, I can go back to my hometown today and ask to hunt someplace. I've been gone from home for 30 years. I can ask to hunt somewhere, and immediately they'll say, "Who are you?" And I'll give them my name, and they don't call me Mike. They call me Size Boy. My dad's name was Size. And so after all these years, I'm still referred to as Size Boy. And so that's the part that was really, you know, out of place for me in my head. Like, how does a guy who's so good and so relational and has such a great reputation die broke? And that was the fire under my butt to say, I have to figure this out. And so much so that it was at the exclusion of everything else. And I was obsessed. Literally, I was going to bed thinking about it. I had a notepad by my bed. I was interviewing people like, can you just help me start a business? Because I want to figure out a way to create wealth and make money because of that pain that I saw. And there wasn't there wasn't even a real plan, honestly. It was just this moment of pain and acknowledging that the promise to myself that I would never let it happen again. And so I wasn't thinking I wasn't thinking then about my family until my family fell apart. Did I start thinking about family, which is crazy to even say that because I was thinking on one hand, I'm doing this for them, but my wife certainly didn't get the attention that she needed and deserved, and my kids didn't. I would work 7 days a week if I could because I was so obsessed with it. And it wasn't until that divorce and all of that the family piece really came into focus for me. And now, man, those two things, it isn't one without the other. You got to have both.
Yeah,
What's the point of having all the money if you don't share it with people you love?
that's right. And I think for whatever it's worth to the audience, there's a real hard, potentially subtle lesson in everything that you just said, in that the person on the other side of this wealth creation, right? You're on a mission. You're investing everything you have into it. And you're thinking that this person over here is appreciating all of that effort and time. But in reality, they just want you. They want a little bit of your time, your attention, and so on and so forth. So we can't, for our audience who is listening and or watching, don't lose that, because Michael makes an incredible point there that sometimes people don't have the same sort of perspective that you do. And they just want sometimes it's just like children, right? They just want your time. And you think you're doing it for the right reasons, but you're not.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Even though your intent and your heart is pure and it's altruistic, without checking in on the people you're doing it for and knowing how they're feeling about it, it could all be in vain. And so I hope it's not for those that are listening. Hopefully they're wiser than me and don't require the slap upside the head that I had to have to learn. I'm sort of hard-headed, I guess.
Well, I can relate. Switching gears slightly, you have alluded to the creation of wealth, which is a very different thing than making money. And so can you delineate those two things? Because I think it's very important for people to grasp the idea of building wealth and what that means versus making money. Sometimes people conflate those two things or think they're the same thing, but they're not. They're very different things.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Mike. I think so. When I think of wealth, I think about enduring something that will last beyond my lifetime and legacy and things that pay me when I'm not trading my time to earn money. And I think making money as in trading my time in exchange for something for money. And so that's how I delineated in my own head as whether if I'm trading time for money, that's making money. Buying assets or building a business or doing things to set up the future that make money without my involvement, that's wealth building. And so it's really important for us in our family to always be thinking about wealth building. We're planning for 100 years from now. So the cycle that you talked about, in some places they call it the shirt sleeves of shirt sleeves. In 3 generations, you probably heard that, where somebody buys something, the first generation buys something, the second generation builds it, the third generation sells it, and the fourth generation has to start over again. And we want to break that cycle, even more importantly than just the cycle of me and my kids and my family. So we're planning for 100 years from now, which is the fifth and sixth and maybe even seventh generation that we don't even know yet. And so it's interesting, the human mind is a computer, it's a machine. You can't not answer a question. I'll give you a simple example. And Mike, I want you to do your very best to not answer this, okay? Whatever, with all your might, I'm going to ask you a question in your mind. Do not answer. What color is the sky? Right?
Right. So it's hard.
Everybody that's listening said blue or gray, wherever they're at.
Yeah.
But we probably said blue. Well, the power of that simple example is the questions we ask ourselves really dictate what our mind goes to work on. And so for us, it wasn't, we had to switch, progressively to more important or bigger questions. One is, how do I make money? Two is, how do I create wealth? Level three might be, how do I create intergenerational wealth and plan for 100 years? And once you set your mind to work on that problem, it's a machine and it comes up with answers. And most people are limited not by the opportunity, but oftentimes limited by the questions they're asking themselves, which can then allow them to experience the power of their brain working on these problems for them and coming up with answers to the bigger questions. And I think that's what you're really getting at, is how do you ask the bigger questions? Or at least that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Because so few people do, maybe because it's scarcity mindset or it's fear or trying to please their parents or whatever it might be that's holding them back. But if you can get to those higher level questions, that's where I think you can truly unleash the power that's within, which I think is divinely placed there. I think it's a divine appointment that we all have this mantle placed on us for greatness, and it's up to us to unleash that, and it only happens through asking the right questions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's we've been gifted, and it's on us to be good stewards of that gift and to express that into what it is supposed to be by that divine placement. And I 100% believe in that and have for a very, very long bit of time. I'm interested, when you started asking yourself those bigger questions, it manifests itself into Freed, right? It manifests itself in many different ways, but it manifests itself into this sort of vision for an organization. And so now I kind of want to shift to tell us about Freed, maybe how it manifested in your head, but then how it's sort of coming to be and continuing to evolve as an organization. I think it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a great question, because it starts with everything is created at least twice, right? Once in your mind and then in reality. And sometimes there's a step in between, or a couple of steps, iterative steps in between, the more complex problems that you are solving for sometimes require multiple steps. But it's nonetheless created at least twice, once in your mind and then in reality. So giving yourself permission to ask those questions is the first thing. And I'm gonna take a step back and then answer your question directly, because I think it's important for context. What happens, Mike, is when people ask those bigger questions, the brain starts to come up with answers, and you start to use the truth. I believe is always around us. I think in my little mind, I envision the truth as like circling us, and it's always available to us. And at some points, when our mind is ready, we will receive a bit of truth, and we can then use it for we can harness it and use it for the intended purpose, the good intended purpose. If we miss it, it's going to come back around. Like you probably experienced it. I didn't get that truth the first time. In life, it tends to be circular and it comes back around. And then maybe you're fortunate enough to grab it. But when you get that bit of truth and it becomes applicable in your life, there's this moment, I think, where we all instinctively, and maybe it's our fallen nature, we immediately go to how. Like, how do I do that? And oftentimes that how question, because we're asking ourselves probably the wrong question, honestly, it gets filled with usually a narrative that many times doesn't serve us. Like, how, that's too big. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't have the resources. I don't have the talent. I'm not smart enough. I didn't go to the right school. I don't have the right connections. It's whatever. There's all these things that block us and prevent us from taking action. And I think that is the wrong question to be asking. Instead of saying how, it's saying who can help, and who can I surround myself with that I can seek out as a guide that has already been there and done that. Because there's nothing new under the sun. We might think we have some new idea, some great idea, but we don't. Somebody else has already done it. Somebody else is maybe in a different way, but we can borrow that. What that requires, though, I think, which is the key that holds us back, in my view, is that how question, when it's met with this narrative and all the resistance, all the obstacles, it creates fear. And then that fear begins to feed narratives because we're allowing it to, right? And so what we have in our company is this culture of, we call it acting in courage. And if we don't feel fear, it's because we're not pushing ourselves to a place where we can be used. And I realize that might be a little bit hard to understand, but if you commit to something that you're not quite sure of, because you know that you've got this mantle or this calling on you that you want to go to something bigger and better, and you commit to it before you know how, or even before you know who, this fear comes over you. And so we say, courage is not absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of it. And I think that's where faith is. I think that's the only place that God can really use us, is when we're living in this place of, I don't know how, but I trust that this commitment that I've made is going to work out. I share all that because most people will say, I'm not going to act until I know the how. I want to be confident. I want to be sure. And then I'll make a decision. And then I'll start and things will work out. Well, the truth is, you got to start with commitment, act in courage for a season, which is very, very difficult. Living in faith is difficult. After you've done a few reps, you'll start to develop some base level capabilities, because you can't do any, like the first time you did a podcast, you're probably nervous. You probably weren't sure which buttons to push. You didn't know how to use the app. And so you felt this little apprehension. You did a few podcasts. You're like, the mystery's sort of gone. I've got some capabilities. Well, after a dozen or 100 or 2,000, whatever you've done, you develop this confidence, right? That's the cycle. You don't start with confidence. We have to start with commitment. So all that to say, that's sort of the cultural basis for how our company is built. Okay. And I think it's really important to understand how we think about things and how we process things, because when we're thinking about our company, we're filtering it through this. What is the best thing for 100 years from now? Not what we feel like we're confident it can get done today, but what do we think? What is that vision calling for? What is it requiring of us today, so that 100 years from now, what we've set out to do is more likely to be true? So that starts with that commitment. So to bring it back to your question, I'm sorry, that was a bit of a rabbit trail.
Great. It's great. Thank you.
Bring it directly back to your question. We're saying to ourselves, how do we help not only our family, but as many families as we can, to reach the financial goals that they have through education and support, in our case, specifically in real estate? And what does that need to look like? Well, for us, we want to be able to give guidance in areas that we've actually been tried in and have been found to be true. In other words, we only give tried and true advice. If we haven't done it, we're not the guru of all things, but we're going to be very, very good at a few things, and we're going to share that information from a place of experience and a place of empathy and compassion, because we know that whole cycle of, I'm afraid, I don't know how, and what do I do, right? That's all in all of us. But what it's led to is we have a company that just buys properties. It's led by my son, Luke. We have our own construction company that does all of the renovations, all the remodeling. That's led by my son, Paul. We have our own property management company that is led by my daughter, Elaine, and her husband, and son-in-law, Ben. We have a capital raising team that helps investors who are interested in doing the same thing put capital to work in projects that we're working on. That is led by a brother, I would call him. He's family of affinity. They're not blood, they're family of affinity. Chris. And so we have a hard money lending business. So all of these things are intended to be, and it's led by another brother of mine of affinity, Alex. And so the way we're thinking about it, Mike, and I apologize for such a long response, but the context, I think, is so important. The way we think about it is, how do we set this up so that 100 years from now, we can help as many families as possible, and along the way, our family will be elevated with them, with the rest of the families. And it's only through that kind of questioning and through the understanding that there's going to be a lot of fear and acting in courage and, feeling stressed out, that we're going to be able to work those muscles enough to truly be able to stand in front of somebody else and say, I've been there, I've done it, and I can help. Don't do that. We haven't earned the right to ask somebody to follow our advice.
Yeah. And don't apologize for the very long answer. I think the context was absolutely important, and the answer itself is important, and I appreciate it. My mind just starts spinning 1,000 miles an hour as it relates to everything you said. So I'm interested. I'm going to key off one thing that you've said multiple times now, and that's education. It sounds like it's an underpinning of your organization, if not the underpinning. It was that always the case, or did you start the business and then sounds like I can see by your head shaking.
Right.
Talk to me about that, because it was not innate at first.
It wasn't. So have you read, I know you have read the E-Myth?
Yes.
The
And
E-Myth,
revisited.
yeah. So the E-Myth Revisited. Yeah. Excellent book, because the basic premise is that because, for example, because I know how to make pie, which is the example he uses in the book, Sarah's the pie maker. Because I know how to make pie, I know how to run a pie business. That's the myth, right? Because you have technical expertise in something, it doesn't make you good at running a business, because there's the technicians, there's the managers, and there's the entrepreneurs or the leaders. And it takes all three. And so what happens is, those of us who are afflicted with this entrepreneurial spirit, which in many ways I find it to be an affliction, because there'd be to go get a job and just not think so much. Those of us that have this affliction start oftentimes as what I like to call a rugged individualist, where if it's going to be, it's up to me. This extreme ownership and sense of responsibility, and I don't care what obstacles in my way, I'm going to overcome it. And that's great. It's amazing. It's rewarded and recognized and lauded here in the U.S. And I love that. I love that energy. The challenge with that, which is this double-edged sword, or the blind side, whatever you want to call it, is that what will get us to a certain point, this rugged individualism will get us to a certain point. It also becomes our greatest block. If we don't decide at some point to say, everything that's inside, all of this grit and will and decision making and ambition that I have, if I don't somehow dump this out into some kind of we call them playbooks here, or an SOP, a standard operating procedure, or a recipe, whatever word you want to call it, we don't dump that out, we cannot take ourselves out of that technical trench and hand that to somebody else because we know how to do it better. And that's a lie, by the way.
That's right.
We believe our own lies, and we tell ourselves that nobody can do it better. And so we don't write it down. We know what it is, and so we run the business that way, and it caps us very quickly. I don't know any solopreneurs who are ultra wealthy. I like the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team. And that is so true. But how do you, as this rugged individualist, feel comfortable handing something over? Well, trust me, I've been there, and it's the thing of nightmares, to think that if I hand this one thing over, this critical function of the business, and they let it fail, this whole business could fall. That's scary. But it's as soon as you realize that, let me get a draft that's 85%. Let me stay close and equip this person, not abdicate your role and say, here's the recipe, go do it. You still got to spend time with them and equip them. And once you do that, and you've gone through some cycles, and equipping is in my mind, very simple. I do it, you watch, you do it, I watch, you do it on your own, and eventually you teach it. And once you get to the phase where you can teach it, you've got mastery. That takes reps and time, right? And during that season, it's courage. But that's the only way you extract yourself from the technical trenches, move from a rugged individualist to a manager, to somebody that can actually oversee and delegate and empower others to start to grow the business. And that's a high hurdle for many, many entrepreneurs to jump over. And frankly, most don't. But that's sort of been what we say now, Mike, is we use the Disney picture. So and I know I mix analogies, and I'm sorry. The way we think is, imagine the seats, we're on a bus together, and imagine the seats on the bus with the different roles and responsibilities. And we say, we don't ever want, you're in that seat now, but if you stay in that seat, we failed you because you have in you seeds of greatness and you're going to own that seat for a period, but you can't own it forever because the business is going to grow. And as the business grows, you have to grow. And if you don't grow, you're letting us down. And so own the seat, but very, very quickly, get your playbook built. Write down everything you do. Start sharing with others what you do so that you can start training it and find your replacement. Because the greatest need any organization has is leadership. And the greatest need that our business has is leadership. And the only way they can lead is if they're empowering others to take that seat so they can get up out of that seat and move to another seat where there's more courage and more risk and more fear because the business is evolving, that they can truly then step in and help. And that's the cycle that we go through. And we joke about it. We've started how many businesses and how many years, and what's next year going to look like? I don't know. But if it's serving this greater good of 100 years from now, we've helped thousands of families, and our own family's been elevated in the process. It's worth it. It's all worth it. And so it's work and it's a challenge, but man, I can't imagine doing something that I would enjoy more. I really can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. So good. I want to shift to a little more brass tacks, if you will. And I've spent my entire career in the field of real estate, multifamily specifically, big apartment buildings, mostly on the operator side, mostly working for entrepreneurs who are building businesses, one time in the public sphere. I'm leading up to a question about the interest in real estate, right? Over the last, let's say, 48 to 60 months, there's been an extreme interest in real estate because money has been everywhere. Maybe not the last 24 months, but there was a period in time where if you could fog up a mirror, you could get a loan to buy something. The question I have is people who might hesitate. I want to say one more thing, not to get long-winded, but the audience that we're speaking to today are property management professionals across all different layers of the hierarchy, right? From CEOs right down to people who are doing leasing consulting work and maintenance technicians, things of that nature. In my entire career, or the lion's share of my career, I've attempted to tell people what you're doing today is not where the real wealth is built in real estate. It's on this other side where you're buying it. The asset is doing the work for you instead of you doing the trading for time thing. But people today they look out in the world and they think, everybody's buying real estate. Real estate's too expensive. It's the market's too saturated. How do you get people over the fact that it's always the right time to buy real estate? At least in my opinion, it's always the right time to buy real estate. How do you get people over that? You call it fear, but how do you get them over that so that they can actually take a step that is meaningful as it relates to creating wealth for them and their family or future generations?
Yeah, that is such a root question. You're getting at the cause of why people stay stuck versus why others create wealth in the same market, right?
Right, that's right.
The markets can be up and some people are stuck and others are creating wealth, and the market can be down and others are stuck and people are creating wealth. So it isn't market based. It truly is their willingness to either one, believe in themselves and take the risk, or two, find a guide they trust. And Mike, I agree with you 100% that, the operations side of the business is sort of the bread and the butter that we have to make sure we're executing at a high level on. And it takes tremendous talent and will and grit and systems and processes and consistency that is critical and important. At the same time, if you go back to the E-Myth, you have the technician, you have the manager, and then you have the entrepreneur. The true wealth creation comes from creating value and operating a business. While there's incremental value that can be created, maybe through efficiencies in maintenance or systems that you can buy to make it easier to manage properties, or training that you can take on to improve yourself as a manager. To truly move the needle, the mindset shift has to happen. And you said it earlier, from I'm willing to trade my time and get paid a fair return on that time, to either in addition to trading time, I'm going to start buying assets that pay me, or get out of that paradigm of trading time for money, which tends to be more of my approach. Doesn't mean it's right. I'm an all or nothing person, and go all in and say, I'm going to find a way, and be that rugged individualist, or find a guide, whichever one suits you, to truly move the needle and get on the side of buying undervalued real estate, forcing appreciation, improving operations through the teams that we're talking to that you mentioned earlier, which are critical, and experiencing the upside of all of that work, which is the property appreciation, the cash flow increase, the balance sheet growth, all those things that is when you have a liquidity event, whether it's a sale or a refi, it's eye-opening what these events can do for you and your family. I mean, it's life-changing in some cases.
Yeah.
And so to me, it comes down to mindset, Mike. I know you were saying brass tacks, but as a man thinketh, so is he. And if you've limited yourself to say, I'm good with what I'm doing, zero, like, that's good. You should be proud of that, right? Like, I'm not throwing shade at you to say you're not thinking big enough. But there's some people that are listening to this who are saying, I need to be thinking bigger because God put in you this desire that you're not honoring. And that's going to be something that you have to answer to, between you and him. And not all of us are called to be entrepreneurs, but those of us that are, we don't have a choice. I mean, it's an affliction in some ways, but it's a mantle that we get to carry. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I go back to is you got to decide.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's conviction in there's conviction in decision, right? And once you make that decision, the only other option is to start to act in the direction of the decision that you made.
That's right.
If we could shift to, so now I have conviction, and I want to go out and start to create wealth for myself. I could call a guy like yourself, like you mentioned earlier, get a team of mentors around you, people who have blazed this path before. And let's say I do that. What is that first step that you take with me as a mentee, whether you're mentoring youth or you're mentoring somebody who's in their middle age or even older? What's the first step you take with somebody you're onboarding into your process or your system, your organization?
Gosh, you ask great questions. So it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with experience. And so, my 23-year-old son, has purchased 300 properties in 5 years, and he's a young kid who doesn't know any better. He knows the process. He knows our systems. And so it has nothing to do with age. Conversely, my mother's 92. She owns no real estate. And so it has more to do with experience, and not necessarily even real estate experience, maybe interest and experience combined, right? Because we're going to start, the short answer is we're going to start wherever they're at.
Yeah.
And the goal is to connect and to understand what it is that each person is trying to accomplish. I don't have an appetite to say, here's my way, and this is what you need to do. That doesn't appeal to me. What does appeal to me is saying, what are you trying to accomplish? Where are you trying to go? Like, you want to buy one investment property? You want to buy 500 doors? You want to invest in a real estate investment trust? You want to own it on your own? Like, everybody has their own journey and their own story and their own why, and it's unique for each of us. And so, to answer your question directly, I want to get to know what they're trying to accomplish and figure out which resources we have that we can help with. For example, I've got a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old son that one is running rehab crews, has 40 projects going right now. My other son is acquisitions and has bought 300 plus units in 5 years. Those folks, those two boys, can guide somebody that's 70 years old and has never done a remodel before, or can guide somebody who's 28 and has never purchased a property before, because they've got so many reps and so much experience. So it just depends on what they're trying to accomplish. We also, Mike, we believe in giving most of everything we have away. Like, I see myself as a conduit. Everything I have, somebody else gave to me. I have no original ideas, none. but I have ideas that have resonated with me and have worked when I applied them. And all I want to do is be able to share that with other people. And so, do they need a template? Do they need, a whiteboard video? Do they need a webinar? There's so much stuff that we give away for free. We have a community that we bring people into, whether they're beginners or people working on legacy and building a trust for their family, and all points in between. And we're providing help and guidance based on our own experience, what we tried and is true, and allowing them to take it and run with it. And yeah, there is some stuff that's paid for, but the vast majority of what we're doing, we're giving away because there are no new ideas. And again, we're a conduit to help others. The only reason we're charging for anything when it comes to content is because it takes so much time and energy for us to produce it. To take our eye off the ball of helping families, and take our eye off the ball of building our own families well, becomes at a price. And so we want to make sure that there's a fair exchange. But more important than that is the person consuming it has some kind of a vested interest in their own success, right? Call it skin in the game. And so, but yeah, I would say if it's a newbie, come join the community and get access to free content and all the peers and everybody else on the journey. And if you want more specific, tailored mentoring or guidance, we've got a whole team of guys and gals that can help.
Something screams to me in that answer, and it's also some other things you've said leading up to this point, but empathy is, and some research I did, wasn't always your key kind of driving force in the world, right? Giving to others, serving others, and things of that nature. It's not to say that you aren't a good person, but that wasn't always your sort of natural default position. You read a book called Never Split the Difference by probably the chief negotiator in the world, I think Chris Voss, right? Which ultimately led to you writing a book or co-authoring a book with Chris. I'm interested that shift from not being driven by empathy to now empathy sort of being the lead character trait, or at least it sings loudly in you. Talk about that, and then also talk about this journey of authoring a book with Chris, which is pretty incredible.
Mike, this is when you ask that question, I feel this weight inside of me, because what you're poking at is a part of me that I'm not proud of, and I've been working. I'm grateful to hear you say that you see empathy and you hear, that I'm different, maybe than you
That's
didn't
right.
know me before.
That's right.
But that soft underbelly still exists. That's like I was not a good person. Let me change that. I've always been, I think, fundamentally a good person, but I was using the tools that I felt God had given me selfishly. I was looking at people through the lens of, if you can't help me get to where I want to go, I have no time or place for you. I'm embarrassed to even say that, honestly. I'm disappointed in myself that it took me decades to realize that, and it cost me my marriage, and it broke up my family, and lots of hard things came from that way of thinking, that paradigm. And that's been tough. I will tell you that there was a book before Never Split the Difference that I read called Crucial Conversations. And that book it's a little bit hard to read because it's sort of like a textbook, like the theory behind all of what is a crucial conversation and how to have it. And I didn't really know how to apply it. And then I read Never Split the Difference. And the reason this is a counseling session here. The reason that I picked that book up was still because I was very interested in, this is going to help me negotiate better. I'm going to get more deals and it's going to help me. And quickly realized that the tools that Chris teaches, what he calls tactical empathy, which even just saying that, Mike, it sounds very utilitarian and very unempathetic.
Right.
But when you start practicing, and it's things like mirroring, labeling, no-oriented questions, summaries, there's a whole set of tools that when you start to apply them, it's remarkable how different the conversations that I was having work, where I used to sit in a conversation and in my mind, again, I'm not proud of this, but in my mind, I was thinking, what do I need to say next to convince them? Where are they going that I can manipulate them to come back to where I want them to go? And that was the central thought. Every conversation, I would even role play it in my head before the meeting. If they say this is where I'm going to take them. If they did this is what I'm going to do. And it was exhausting. And it worked for something, but I never felt like the relationships were enduring. I felt like I could win, and then the relationship was less valuable to me because I got what I wanted. And after reading the book, Never Split the Difference, and that was on the heels of this Crucial Conversations book, this light bulb kind of went on for me, and I started to practice these things that Chris was teaching. And it was awkward at first. So I'm not a musician, but I liken it to playing the piano, where when you learn to play the piano, they teach you certain chords, right? You play a chord and it sounds really good by itself, and then you play another one, and if you put a few chords together, it turns into music. And forgive me for insulting anybody who's a musician, because I don't know how this works, but that's how I see it in my head. And each of these tools is like a chord. So a mirror is a chord, and you play the chord and you see the response on the other person's face, and you see the look on their face, you hear their response. And it's like, that really landed well with them. And so I would start to play these different chords and put together, again, very uncomfortably and awkwardly, these tools. And I quickly realized that it was the most respectful, most honoring way to communicate with somebody. And the kicker, which was shocking to me, is that the outcome of those conversations was hands down better than the outcome of the conversations that I had, where I was going into it with the full narrative in my head of what I was going to get done and how I was going to accomplish it. Mostly because, and this is the big aha for me, mostly because Chris says it well. He says yes means nothing without how. And oftentimes when I was using my old way, I would get them to a yes, but the implementation would break down. They wouldn't call me back. They wouldn't wire the money. They wouldn't sign the contract. Whatever it was that their yes meant, that was the next step. Whereas now, when we get to a yes, they have enlisted in that yes during the conversation, and we've arrived at this yes together because we've collaborated. Instead of it being, and I'm going to use a visual, a lot of times we'll take something and say, this is what I want, and it's between us. And I see it from one side and you see it from the other, and you would describe it one way and I would describe it another. It's the same thing, but we see it differently. And instead, we move this thing to the side, and now we get on both sides of it and we start working on it together. And that's where this collaboration starts. And when you collaborate with somebody on a solution and you're truly agnostic, meaning I don't care if I buy this property, I don't care if you loan me the money, I don't care if you borrow the money from me, I don't care if you hire me to do this property management, none of that matters. What matters is, how do I help you solve the problem you're trying to solve? And we get to this collaborative place. The result of that conversation is we both work together on a solution, and the implementation, like on the yes, is almost 100%. Instead of me following up and fighting and saying, hey, where are we at on this deal? You said you're going to get this done. What's happening? Micromanaging, being a dictator, being a jerk, honestly, because I have a deal to get done. And it shifts to, we're both aligned. We both want this. And the implementation on their side is easy. Like, I'm not pushing anybody. We agreed to this. This is what we both said was best. And I realize that sounds, saying it very simple and like anybody can do it. But I will tell you, it's been a journey that, now call it 5 years into it, I'm a different person. I 100% of our conversations I walk into curious. I have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, and I love how Chris says this too. He says, never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't accept something better.
That's good.
That is the most powerful suggestion I can offer anybody listening or watching is never be so sure of what you want you wouldn't accept something better. Well, how do you know if it's going to be better? You have to get to this, what I now refer to as a thin place, where all the walls have come down and we're collaborating. Once we get to collaboration, there's this third mind that appears. It's not just you and me anymore. We now have a collective mind, and this collective mind starts to solve problems with us. And the outcome is like you start pinballing ideas off of each other. Hey, what if we did this? Have you thought about that? Like, I was originally thinking we would do this, but here's, I think, maybe a better option. What are your thoughts? And now we've got this collaboration happening, and the outcome is this beautiful agreement that both parties have arrived at. And if we both bought into the solution, what's the likelihood of us executing on it? Pretty darn high.
Pretty high.
That's the genius of what Chris Voss teaches. And Mike, it inspired me to co-author a book with him. And I couldn't be more honored and proud and grateful for the chance to give back, because I don't make anything on the books. I don't want to make anything on the books. I just want to be able to give back to somebody who is in my situation, maybe driven and hardworking and achieving a certain level of success, but feeling empty, to change that to do things for the right reasons and to truly help people. And I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad. I see my kids using it with each other. We literally just hired a new marketing person, and they've spent the last month with us. And today he presented something and he said, this never split the difference that you guys use. I see it everywhere, and it's starting to change me, because it is, Mike, it's the most respectful way to communicate. So you asked me all the long answer questions.
It's so fantastic. There's so many nuggets in there. I want to end cap with sort of two statements. Or one is really a question, and then the other is how can people find out more, whether it be the book, your personal story, etc. But the end cap question is, what have I not asked you that you think would be valuable for our audience to know?
Gosh, what comes to my mind, Mike, is this. I think it's Thoreau that wrote this. It's a quote that most men live lives of quiet desperation. And there's something inside of each of us that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard, that wants to belong, right? And so oftentimes we strive to fit in and to belong and to conform, that we lose ourselves somewhere in there. And to me, that's this what Thoreau is getting at, which is we've sold out somewhere along the way. Like God made us for a reason. We are from Him, we are for Him, and everything we're to do is to honor Him. And yet, somewhere along the way, whether it's our parents shitting on us or spouse saying that we're less than, or our own narrative that says I'm not worth it, or I can't do that, or it's too much. And to me, that's the greatest tragedy, is that we choose to believe that over what our Creator put in us. And so how do you overcome that? I don't have that answer. I just think that's the greatest challenge of mankind, I think, is to figure out how do we, as Maslow would say, self-actualize, which is reach our full potential. And I think that's the challenge that we're all faced with. But if we ask ourselves those questions, the odds of us getting answers go up. So maybe it's just asking those questions and finding other people who will stretch you and challenge you. Like, we're not intended to be alone. And to find a community or find a group that stretches you and challenges you and loves you as you are in the meantime, and life is good. So I know that had nothing to do with real estate, but it's a human thing. And I think that's what we're on some level, we're all trying to find that. And so, yeah, that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, I love it. I think what I hear in the underpinning all of that is, where it's the whole iron sharpens iron philosophy, right? And that I think we're all, at the end of the day, whether it be a catalyst that presents out of the ether and or catalysts that are presented because of other people making decisions that impact you in some way, we're all here to sharpen one another's character. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about our character development. And if we approach life like that and we are open to having our own character sharpened, I think the world just ends up being a better place. But it's a lot of work and a lot of putting the ego in check.
Yeah, so there is a real quick story, and then we'll end because I know we need to go. I'm a big volleyball fan, and we're recording this right when the Final Four, NCAA college volleyball Final Four, was figured out last night. And there was a story on the former national championship star player who has won 2 championships and was competing for her 3rd this year. They lost and they're out. But the story that she shared on national TV really struck me. She said I'm always hungry for a national championship. But after winning 2, what I've realized is the trophies, the awards, the accolades, all the success, when compared to the relationships and the people who have helped me get where I'm trying to go, mean nothing. I'm paraphrasing.
Sure.
And I think that's what you're saying is, like, it's who draws out of you the very best of you, your character. Like, that's who you want to surround yourself with. And I think that's what we're all trying to find and figure out. And so this has been a wonderful conversation. Unexpected. I thought we were going to talk about cap rates and interest rates and deal flow and all that stuff. But man, it comes down to humanity at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I absolutely appreciate you being willing to go down this path. It's interesting. You're not the first person that's said that to me as it relates to these conversations. And I think in part why I don't script them, largely don't script them, is because I really do want to understand what makes the person tick. And I think that the audience really likes that. And they get real value out of that because you're a real person, I'm a real person, and they can make application of that. All right. Tell people where they can learn more, because my imagination tells me I'm intrigued. I want to learn more. Where can people learn more about you, your organization, what you're up to?
Yeah, the best place is just our website, freedbyrealestate.com. I'm also active on social media, so you can find me, Michael Kramer, either on Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn. But I'd start with the website, freedbyrealestate.com.
Excellent. Well, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you investing the time with me. It's been deeply meaningful.
Likewise, Mike. I've really enjoyed it. You're a good man, a good interviewer. It's been fun.
Thank you. All right. Until next time.
Okay.